The dinner party in the Chicago penthouse was a masterclass in elegance, from the baccarat crystal to the polite laughter of the city's elite. But beneath the polished veneer, a single notification on a face-down iPhone shattered the illusion for Julian. He watched his wife touch a hand to her necklace, a nervous tick she thought went unnoticed, while her eyes darted toward the man who was supposedly just her personal trainer. There is a terrifying quiet before a marriage collapses, a silence heavy with secrets and impending ruin. If you want to witness the moment the silence breaks and the real cost of betrayal is tallied, stay with me. The wind off Lake Michigan battered the glass panes of the penthouse, a low, rhythmic thrumming that usually lulled Julian Vance to sleep. Tonight, however, it sounded like a warning. Julian stood by the kitchen island, the marble surface cool beneath his fingertips. He swirled the Pinot Noir in his glass, watching the crimson liquid coat the sides, waiting. The silence in the apartment was not peaceful, it was pressurized. It was the kind of silence that precedes a structural failure. Elena was sitting on the beige sectional in the living area, her legs tucked beneath her, the glow of her iPad illuminating a face that had graced the 40 under 40 list just last month. She was typing furiously, her brow furrowed in that way she reserved for crisis management at her PR firm. But this wasn't work. It was 11:15 p.m. on a Tuesday. "She's my sister, Elena," Julian said, his voice low, trying not to disturb the tenuous atmosphere. Elena didn't look up. Her fingers didn't stop moving across the screen. "We have discussed this, Julian. We have discussed this ad nauseum. She has nowhere else to go. The halfway house had a burst pipe. They're relocating people to shelters. Maya can't be in a shelter. She's 90 days sober. She's fragile." Finally, Elena stopped typing. She set the iPad down on the coffee table with a deliberate clack and turned to face him. Her eyes, usually a warm hazel, were hard, reflecting the recessed lighting above. "Fragile," Elena repeated, tasting the word like spoiled milk. "Julian, this is our home. It is my sanctuary. I run a multi-million-dollar agency. I deal with crises all day. I cannot come home to that energy. You know how addicts are. The drama, the unpredictability. I can't have her sleeping in the guest room, wondering if my jewelry is going to go missing." "She has never stolen from us," Julian defended, though his grip on the wine glass tightened. "Not once. There is a first time for everything," she countered, standing up and smoothing out her silk loungewear. She walked toward the kitchen, not to him, but to the filtered water dispenser. She moved with a practiced grace, the result of years of Pilates and personal training. "Look, I love that you care about her. It's noble, but your sister can't stay here. It's a hard boundary for me. I need peace, Julian. I need to feel safe in my own house." Julian watched her pour the water. Safe. The word hung in the air, ironic and heavy. It would only be for 2 weeks, he tried one last time, desperation creeping into his tone. "Just until I find her a studio apartment." Elena took a sip, her eyes drifting past him to the dark hallway leading to the bedrooms. "No. I'm sorry, but no. Put her in a hotel. Use the joint account if you must, though I'd prefer you didn't enable her." A chime sounded from her phone, which she had left on the sofa. Elena's head snapped toward the sound. It was a visceral reaction, faster than thought. She abandoned her water glass on the counter and walked quickly back to the living room. Julian watched her pick up the phone. Her posture changed instantly. The rigidity left her shoulders. A small, almost imperceptible smile played on her lips before she suppressed it. She typed a quick reply, then locked the screen and placed it face down. "Who was that?" Julian asked. He hadn't meant to ask. He usually respected her privacy, the unspoken agreement of two busy professionals. "Just work," Elena said, her voice lighter now, the tension regarding Maya apparently forgotten. "A client crisis. The senator's campaign manager." "At 11 at night?" "The news cycle never sleeps, darling." She walked past him, her hand brushing his arm dismissively. "I'm going to bed. I have an early session with Marcus tomorrow morning. He wants to try a new high-intensity circuit, so I need my rest." Marcus. The name landed softly, harmlessly. Her personal trainer. Julian remained in the kitchen, He looked at the water glass she had left behind, a smudge of her lip balm on the rim. He thought about Maya, shivering in a temporary housing facility, fighting the urge to use, needing nothing more than a warm room and her big brother. Your sister can't stay here. He turned his gaze toward the living room, to the spot where Elena had checked her phone. He walked over, his socks sliding on the polished hardwood. He wasn't a man who snooped. He was an architect. He built structures based on trust and physics. If the foundation was solid, the building stood. But tonight, the wind was howling, and the building felt like it was swaying too much. He looked down at the coffee table where she had been sitting. She had taken her phone, but she had left the iPad unlocked. Julian hesitated. His heart hammered against his ribs, a dull thud of anxiety. He reached out and touched the screen. It woke up instantly. It wasn't an email to a senator's campaign manager. It was iMessage. And it wasn't synced to her phone's current conversation, but the previous one was still visible on the side panel. Marcus, Jim left my hoodie in the guest room. Don't let him find it. Elena, he won't go in there. He's too busy worrying about his junkie sister. Can't wait for tomorrow. 8 a.m. Marcus, Jim, make it 7. I want you before the workout. Julian stared at the words. The white text on the gray background seemed to float, detaching itself from reality. Left my hoodie in the guest room. The guest room. The very room Elena had claimed was too precious, too sacred to house his struggling sister. She had denied Maya shelter to protect her sanctuary, all while turning that same sanctuary into a playground for her lover. The cruelty of it wasn't just the cheating. It was the displacement. Elena wasn't just rejecting Maya. She was replacing the family she married into with the man she was sleeping with. Julian turned off the iPad. He carefully placed it back exactly where it had been, measuring the angle with his eyes to ensure it looked untouched. He felt a coldness spread through his chest, freezing the anger before it could explode. It was a useful coldness. It was the kind of detachment he used when he had to fire a contractor or demolish a flawed structure. He picked up his wine glass and finished the Pinot Noir in one long swallow. Then he walked to the window, looking out at the city lights of Chicago, blurring in the snowstorm. Okay, Elena, he whispered to the empty room. You want boundaries? We'll establish boundaries. He pulled out his own phone and dialed the number for the hotel Maya liked. He would pay cash. He would take care of his sister. And then, he would take care of the rest. Tomorrow, Marcus was coming at 7 a.m. Julian decided he would be gone by 6:30. Not to retreat, but to prepare. Your sister can't stay here. Neither will you, Julian murmured, his reflection in the glass looking like a stranger. Neither will you. The Hyatt Regency near O'Hare was nice enough, but it was impersonal. A transient space of beige wallpapers and sealed windows that smelled faintly of industrial lavender. It was a place for layovers, not for recovery. Julian stood by the door of room 412, watching his sister unpack her meager belongings. Maya moved with a brittleness that terrified him, her hands trembling slightly as she placed a framed photo of their parents on the nightstand. She looked thinner than he remembered, her eyes wide and searching for stability. It's better this way, Jules, Maya said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She sat on the edge of the stiff mattress. Really, I don't want to impose. Elena, she has her standards. I get it. It's not about standards, Julian lied, his throat tight. It's just, the apartment is undergoing some renovations. It's chaotic. I didn't want you breathing in the dust. It was a clumsy lie, and he knew Maya saw right through it. She simply nodded, accepting the rejection because she was used to being the problem everyone had to solve. I paid for a month, Julian said, checking his watch to avoid her gaze. I'll visit every other day. We'll get dinner. Go home, Julian, she said softly. You have a life to get back to. Leaving her there felt like abandoning a child in a storm. The drive back to the Gold Coast was a blur of gray slush and brake lights. Julian gripped the steering wheel of his Audi until his knuckles turned white. Renovations. The only thing being dismantled in that penthouse was his marriage. When the private elevator opened into his foyer, the air in the apartment felt different, warmer, humid, charged with a scent that wasn't his. It was a mix of Elena's expensive floral perfume and the sharp, metallic tang of male exertion. Julian walked into the living area. The floor-to-ceiling windows were dark, turning the room into a mirror. "Oh, you're back early." The voice came from the kitchen. It wasn't Elena. Marcus stood by the marble island, leaning back against the counter with a casual arrogance that made Julian's blood run cold. He was wearing a tight-fitting Under Armour shirt that highlighted his deltoids, and he was holding one of Julian's crystal tumblers, filled with water, but the violation felt the same as if he were drinking the vintage scotch. "Marcus," Julian said, his voice flat, devoid of inflection. He hung his coat on the rack, taking his time. "I didn't realize the session ran this late." "We pushed it," Marcus said, taking a sip from the glass. He didn't straighten up. He didn't show the deference of an employee. He looked at Julian with a gaze that was almost pitying. "Elena's stamina is incredible lately. She's in the shower." "She's in the shower." The intimacy of the statement hung in the air. A man who was just an employee wouldn't know exactly where the lady of the house was, nor would he be comfortable enough to wait in her kitchen while she bathed. "I see," Julian said. He walked to the island, placing his briefcase down with a heavy thud, encroaching on Marcus's space. "You make yourself at home, Marcus." "Just hydrating, Mr. Vance." Marcus smirked, though he shifted slightly, sensing the change in atmospheric pressure. "Elena mentioned you were dealing with some family issues. Sister trouble?" The audacity took Julian's breath away. Elena had discussed Maya with him. She had taken the raw, painful reality of his sister's addiction, the very reason she claimed Maya couldn't stay here, and turned it into gossip for her lover. "My family is none of your concern," Julian said, his eyes locking onto Marcus's. "And neither is my glassware." Marcus paused, the glass halfway to his mouth. For a second, the mask slipped, and a flash of aggression crossed his face, but he quickly covered it with a shrug. He set the glass down on the counter. "My bad. Just thirsty work." "I'm sure it is." Elena swept into the room then, wrapped in a plush white robe, her hair wet and slicked back. Her skin was flushed pink, from the shower, or from whatever had happened before it. "Julian, you're back," she said, her voice a little too high, a little too bright. She didn't kiss him. She went straight to the fridge, pulling out a bottle of kale juice. "Did you get Maya settled?" "She's at the Hyatt," Julian said, watching the dynamic between his wife and the trainer. They weren't looking at each other, which was the biggest tell of all. They were actively avoiding eye contact, creating a magnetic field of conscious ignoring. "Good," Elena said, unscrewing the cap. "She'll be more comfortable there. Room service, maid service. It's better for everyone." "Right," Julian said. "Better." He looked at the hallway leading to the guest room, the room that was off limits to Maya. "I'm going to change," Julian said. He walked past them. As he entered the hallway, he paused. The door to the guest room was slightly ajar. He pushed it open. The room was pristine, ready for a guest that would never arrive. But on the accent chair in the corner, a dark gray Nike hoodie lay crumpled in a heap. "Left my hoodie in the guest room. Don't let him find it." Julian stared at the fabric. It wasn't just a piece of clothing. It was a flag planted on conquered territory. Elena hadn't even bothered to check if Marcus had retrieved it. She was so confident in Julian's blindness, so sure of his submission. He didn't touch it. He backed out of the room and closed the door softly. He went into the master bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, their bed, and listened to the murmur of their voices in the kitchen. They were laughing now. Low, intimate laughter. He pulled out his phone and opened the calendar app. He typed a new entry for 2 weeks from now, the gala. Then, he opened his banking app. He didn't transfer money to Maya. Instead, he took a screenshot of the joint account transactions. Gym payments, supplements, cash withdrawals. The structure was rotting, but Julian Vance was done trying to patch the cracks. It was time to draw up the demolition plans. The architecture of a lie is surprisingly similar to the architecture of a building. It requires maintenance. If you look closely enough, you can see where the stress is being applied, where the load-bearing walls are buckling under the weight of the deception. 3 days after the hoodie incident, Julian sat in the leather Barcelona chair in their living room, A set of blueprints for a new magnificent library in Evanston spread across his lap. He wasn't reading them. He was watching Elena pack her gym bag. It was 7:45 p.m. on a Friday. Marcus squeezed me in for a late cancellation spot, Elena said, her back to him. She was folding a towel with unnecessary precision. I figure if I burn off the calories now, we can go for brunch on Sunday without the guilt. Friday night seems aggressive for cardio, Julian noted, keeping his voice mild, flipping a page of the blueprints without looking at it. You know how the gala stress gets to me, Julian. I need the endorphins. She turned around. She was wearing her usual Lululemon leggings, but her face was different. She had applied fresh mascara, and her lips were tinted a soft berry shade, a color she usually reserved for client dinners, not for sweating on a treadmill. But the most damning detail was the scent wafting across the room. It wasn't the clean, citrusy deodorant she typically wore. It was Baccarat Rouge 540. Heavy, musky, expensive. It was a perfume meant to linger on skin and sheets, not to be washed away in a locker room shower. You smell nice, Julian said. Elena froze for a fraction of a second, her hand hovering over the zipper of her bag. Oh, this? I just grabbed whatever bottle was on the vanity. Didn't realize it was the good stuff. She zipped the bag shut. I shouldn't be late. Probably back by 10. Take your time, Julian said. Don't overexert yourself. She walked over and kissed him on the forehead. It was a dry, perfunctory peck, the kind one gives to a pet or an elderly relative. You're the best. Don't wait up. As the front door clicked shut, the silence rushed back in, but this time, Julian didn't sit in it. He stood up immediately. He walked to the window and looked down at the street, 40 stories below. It was hard to distinguish cars from this height, but he knew Marcus drove a silver Range Rover. Elise Elena had helped him secure through a corporate partnership discount 6 months ago. Julian watched as a silver SUV pulled up to the curb, not the service entrance where a trainer would usually wait, but the main entrance. A minute later, a small figure emerged from the building and slipped into the passenger seat. The car didn't head toward the gym in the West Loop. It merged onto Lake Shore Drive, heading north. Julian turned away from the window. He walked into the master bathroom, the scent of her perfume still hanging in the humid air. The vanity was cluttered with her arsenal of beauty products. He opened the small, woven wastebasket beneath the sink. Usually, the housekeeper emptied it every morning, but it was Friday night. On top of a pile of cotton pads and tissues lay a small, crumpled black box. Julian reached in and pulled it out. The gold lettering on the black cardboard was unmistakable, La Perla. He opened the box. It was empty, but the tissue paper inside was torn, as if someone had removed the contents in a hurry. Elena hated lace. She had always complained it was itchy, preferring smooth silk or cotton. She famously said that lingerie was a waste of money for something that ends up on the floor. Yet, here was a box for a bodysuit that cost more than most people's car payments, discarded in the trash like a shameful secret. She hadn't packed a towel in that gym bag because she needed to shower at the gym. She had packed the towel to hide what was underneath it. Julian placed the box back in the bin, exactly as he had found it, covering it with a used makeup wipe. He went back to the living room and poured himself a whiskey neat. The liquid burned pleasantly on the way down. He sat back in the chair and picked up his phone. He didn't call her. He didn't track her location. She was smart enough to probably leave her phone in the locker at the actual gym or turn off the location services. Instead, he opened his email and composed a message to the forensic accountant his firm used for auditing difficult projects. Subject: Personal audit, confidential body. Andrew, I need a full forensic sweep of my joint personal accounts and the household operational cards going back 12 months. Flag any recurring payments to hospitality groups, consulting fees, or cash withdrawals over $500. Priority 1. He hit send. The crack in the glass was no longer a hairline fracture. It was a jagged line running right through the center of his life. He knew they were lying. He knew they were laughing at him. But Julian Vance was an architect. He knew that if you wanted to bring down a building safely, you didn't just swing a wrecking ball wildly. You weakened the structural integrity, column by column, until gravity did the rest. He took a sip of whiskey. "Enjoy your workout, Elena," he whispered into the dark room. The penthouse was a marvel of modern engineering, a glass box suspended in the sky, controlled by a central nervous system of servers and sensors that Julian himself had specified. Elena loved the aesthetic, the hidden speakers, the automated blinds, the lighting that adjusted to the circadian rhythm. What she didn't understand, or perhaps had forgotten in her arrogance, was that a smart home is also a watching home. It was 2 a.m. Elena was asleep in the master bedroom. Julian could hear the faint, rhythmic sound of the white noise machine she insisted on using. He was in his study, the glow of 3 high-definition monitors illuminating his face in a ghostly blue. He wasn't working on the Evanston library. He was logged into the admin root of the house's localized network. Most people relied on cloud-based apps, Ring, Nest, the consumer-grade toys that stored footage for 30 days and sent cheerful notifications. Julian's system was different. It was a hardwired, closed-circuit proprietary system. It didn't just record, it archived. And while the user interface on the iPad allowed for easy deletion of clips, the raw data on the local server remained until it was overwritten. That process took 6 months. His fingers moved across the keyboard, entering the developer key. The command prompt window opened, a black void waiting for instructions. He typed in a query for motion triggers in the kitchen/living zone between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. on weekdays for the past month, times when he was reliably at his firm and Elena was supposedly working from home or at meetings. The screen populated with hundreds of timestamps. He clicked on a file dated 2 weeks prior. A Tuesday, 11:14 a.m. The video player opened. The resolution was crystal clear, 4K definition capturing the dust motes dancing in the sunlight. The kitchen appeared on the screen. It was empty for a few seconds. Then, Elena walked into the frame. She wasn't dressed for a meeting. She was wearing a silk robe, tied loosely. She looked relaxed, happy in a way he hadn't seen in years. A moment later, Marcus entered the frame. He was shirtless, wearing only gray sweatpants. He walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, burying his face in her neck. Julian watched, unblinking. He felt a phantom physical blow to his chest, but he forced himself to breathe evenly. On screen, Elena leaned back into Marcus. She said something, her face turning toward him. Julian toggled the audio channel. The sound was crisp, captured by the high-fidelity microphones meant for voice commands. "He won't be back until 7. Elena's voice came through the speakers, tinny but unmistakable. "We have time." "Does he suspect anything?" Marcus asked, lifting her up onto the marble counter, the same counter where Julian ate his toast every morning. Elena laughed, a low, throaty sound. "Julian, please. He lives in his blueprints. He doesn't see anything unless it's made of steel and concrete. He thinks we have a spiritual disconnect." Marcus smirked, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. "Spiritual? Is that what we're calling it?" "He's boring, Marcus. He's safe. He pays for all of this." She gestured around the room, around the very cage that was now recording her. "But he's not. Alive. Not like this." Julian froze the frame. The image was a grotesque parody of domestic bliss. His wife, sitting on his counter, legs wrapped around another man, mocking the very safety he provided her. She called him boring. She called him blind. He doesn't see anything unless it's made of steel and concrete. The irony was acidic. She was right, in a way. He did see the world in structures. And right now, looking at the frozen pixels of his wife's betrayal, he didn't see a heartbreak. He saw a breach of contract. He saw a structural failure that required immediate condemnation. He didn't cry. The time for tears had passed in the hallway with the hoodie. Now was the time for archival. He opened a secure, encrypted folder on an external hard drive he had connected to the tower. He named the file Exhibit A_kitchen_NOV14. He dragged the video file into it. Then he went back to the list. There were dozens of files. The living room, the hallway, even the audio logs from the terrace. He spent the next 3 hours downloading them all. Every kiss, every insult, every moment they had stolen from him in his own home. He built a digital mausoleum of their affair. By 5 a.m., the drive was full. He ejected it, the mechanical whirring sound final and satisfying. He placed the drive in his fireproof safe, behind his passport and the deed to the penthouse. He stood up, his joints stiff. He walked to the window. The sun was just beginning to bruise the horizon over the lake, a deep, angry purple. He went to the kitchen. The real kitchen, not the digital one. He looked at the spot on the counter where she had sat. He ran his hand over the cold stone. He pulled out the disinfectant spray and a cloth. He scrubbed the spot. He scrubbed it until his arm ached, until the smell of bleach overpowered the scent of stale coffee. She wanted alive. He would show her what happened when the safety she despised was stripped away. He would show her exactly how cold steel and concrete could be. The offices of Sterling and Cho were located on the 54th floor of a steel monolith on Wacker Drive, a building Julian had always admired for its brutalist efficiency. It was a place where emotions came to die, suffocated by billable hours and mahogany paneling. Julian sat across from Robert Sterling, his oldest friend and personal attorney. Between them lay a thick, leather-bound document that hadn't been opened in 5 years, the prenuptial agreement, cross-referenced with the deed to the Lake Shore Drive penthouse. Robert adjusted his spectacles, the only sound in the room the rhythmic thwip of pages turning. The air conditioning hummed a low, sterile note. "You're certain about the footage?" Robert asked, not looking up. He was a man who treated adultery with the same clinical detachment as tax evasion. "I have 400 gigabytes of it," Julian replied, his voice steady. "Audio and video. 4K resolution. You can see the brand of the condoms." Robert stopped turning the pages. He looked up, a flicker of grim appreciation in his eyes. "Efficient. Illinois is a no-fault state for divorce, generally speaking. You know that. Infidelity usually doesn't move the needle much on asset division unless financial dissipation is involved." "I know," Julian said. He leaned forward, tapping a specific paragraph on the open document. "But we didn't just sign a standard prenup, Robert. We signed the Vance Family Trust Residency Agreement." Robert followed Julian's finger. He read the clause silently, his lips moving slightly. Clause 14b. Julian recited from memory. He didn't need to read it. He had written the parameters himself, designing the legal structure with the same fail-safes he used for skyscrapers. The morality and residency provision. The property is held by the trust. The spouse is granted right of habitation solely contingent upon the maintenance of the marital contract within the premises. "Right," Robert murmured, reading the fine print. "If the beneficiary, Elena, engages in acts of infidelity inside the trust's property, the right of habitation is immediately revoked. It's treated as a breach of lease." "Trespassing," Julian corrected. "It becomes trespassing." Robert sat back, taking off his glasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "It's aggressive, Julian. It's draconian. If you enforce this, you aren't just divorcing her. You are evicting her. Immediately. With cause." "She brought him into my house, Robert," Julian said, the coldness in his chest solidifying into ice. "She didn't just sleep with him. She moved him in. She mocked me in my own kitchen while I was paying for her life. She denied my sister a roof over her head to protect the sanctuary, all while she was defiling it." Robert nodded slowly. "The footage proves the act occurred on the premises. That satisfies the condition. The moment you serve her, she has, well, technically, 0 notice period. The contract stipulates immediate forfeiture of access codes and keys. And the assets? She gets what she came in with," Robert said, closing the folder. "Which, if I recall, was a student loan debt and a used Honda. The business she started? You funded the initial capital as a loan, not a gift. We can call that in, too." Julian stood up and walked to the window. The city sprawled out below him, a grid of gray and white. Elena was out there somewhere, likely planning her outfit for the winter solstice gala, believing she was the queen of Chicago. She thought the glass walls of their penthouse were there to let the view in. She forgot that glass is also brittle. "She wants a show," Julian said softly. "She's hosting the gala next week." She invited him. "Marcus." She wants to parade him around in front of my colleagues, disguised as a networking opportunity. That's bold, Robert noted. It's not bold. It's careless. Julian turned back to his lawyer. Prepare the papers. The eviction notice, the restraining order, the divorce filing. Everything. When do you want to serve them? Robert asked, unscrewing his fountain pen. I can have a process server at the door tomorrow morning. No, Julian said. A dark, terrifying calm settled over him. Not tomorrow. She loves a captive audience. She loves being the center of attention. He thought of the gala, the champagne, the investors, the press, the precarious social ladder Elena had spent 5 years climbing. Bring the papers to the gala, Julian commanded. Wait in the lobby. I'll give the signal. Robert hesitated, then nodded. It's going to be a bloodbath, Julian. No. Julian buttoned his suit jacket, checking his reflection in the glass. It's just a demolition. Controlled implosion. He walked out of the office without looking back. He had the blueprint. Now, he just had to wait for everyone to enter the building before he hit the detonator. The dining room table was buried under a drift of cream-colored cardstock. The Winter Solstice Gala was 3 days away, and the logistics were entering the critical phase. This wasn't just a party. It was a currency exchange for Chicago's elite, where influence was traded over caviar and charitable donations. Julian sat at the head of the table, a fountain pen in his hand, reviewing the seating chart. He looked like the picture of a supportive husband, helping his wife navigate the social minefield. In reality, he was arranging the pieces on a chessboard. Elena paced behind him, her heels clicking rhythmically on the hardwood. She was anxious. He could feel it radiating off her like heat. She stopped at the sideboard to pour herself a glass of sparkling water, her reflection caught in the dark window pane. We have 2 empty seats at table 9, Elena said casually. Too casually. It was the tone she used when she was trying to upsell a client on a PR package they didn't need. The Potters had to cancel. Family emergency in Aspen. Julian didn't look up from the chart. He marked a small X over the Potters' names. Table 9 is prime real estate. Next to the city councilman. We should fill it with someone useful. I was thinking, Elena started, walking back toward the table and resting a hand on his shoulder. Her touch, once comforting, now felt like a brand. Maybe we could invite Marcus? And perhaps a +1, to make it professional? Julian paused. The pen hovered over the paper. He slowly raised his head to look at her. Your trainer? He's not just a trainer, Julian, she said quickly, her defense mechanism springing into place. He's launching a boutique wellness consultancy. High-end residential gyms. He's looking for investors, and half the people in this room are potential clients. It would be a nice gesture, you know, to help someone starting out. The audacity was breathtaking. She wasn't just content with sleeping with him in Julian's bed. She wanted to integrate him into Julian's world. She wanted to sip champagne with her lover in front of her husband, shielded by the crowd, getting a thrill from the proximity, the danger, and the sheer disrespect of it all. Julian looked into her eyes. He searched for a flicker of guilt, a hesitation. He found none. Only the glossy, hard surface of her entitlement. She believed she was smarter than him. She believed he was the passive, clueless architect who built walls but never looked behind them. You think he's ready for this crowd? Julian asked, his voice steady, masking the bile rising in his throat. I think he'd be grateful. Elena smiled, a tight, controlled expression. And it makes us look benevolent. Supporting local entrepreneurs. It's good optics. Optics, Julian repeated. Everything is optics with you, Elena. Is that a yes? Julian looked back down at the seating chart. Table 9. Center of the room. Directly in the line of sight of the podium where Julian would give the opening toast. It was perfect. It was better than he could have engineered himself. Sure, Julian said, writing the name Marcus in the empty slot. The ink flowed dark and permanent. Invite him. Let him see how the other half lives. Elena let out a breath she had been holding. She squeezed his shoulder, a gesture of victorious condescension. You're wonderful. Really. I know you think these events are frivolous, but it means a lot to me. I know it does, Julian said. I want this night to be unforgettable for you. It will be, she promised, walking away to text Marcus the good news. It's going to be the highlight of the season. Julian watched her go. He looked at the name written on the chart. Marcus. He picked up his phone and sent a text to Robert, his lawyer. Julian, target confirmed. He's attending. Have the servers ready. He capped his pen. The invitation was extended. The trap was baited. Elena thought she was bringing a guest to the party. She had no idea she was inviting the executioner to her own funeral. Unforgettable, Julian whispered to the empty room. I guarantee it. The drive from the Gold Coast to the airport hotel district was a transition between two different worlds. Julian left behind the tree-lined streets and heated sidewalks of his neighborhood, merging onto the Kennedy Expressway where the slush turned gray and the city lights blurred into streaks of industrial orange. He parked his Audi in the surface lot of the Hyatt. The wind whipped across the open asphalt, carrying the scent of jet fuel and damp concrete. It was a stark contrast to the climate-controlled, jasmine-scented air of his penthouse. He took the elevator to the 4th floor. The hallway was quiet, save for the hum of an ice machine. He knocked on room 412. Maya opened the door immediately, as if she had been standing right behind it waiting for a sound. She was wearing oversized sweatpants and a thick wool sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her face was scrubbed clean, revealing the pale, translucent skin of someone who hadn't seen enough sun lately. Hey, she said, stepping back to let him in. I didn't think you were coming tonight. With the gala prep and all. I needed a break, Julian said, placing a brown paper bag on the small round table. I brought Thai food from that place on State Street you like. Extra spicy pad CEW. Maya's eyes lit up briefly, a ghost of her old self. You remembered. Of course. They sat at the small table by the window, which overlooked the highway and a sprawling parking garage. They ate from the cartons in a companionable silence, but Julian couldn't help but catalog the room. The bed was made with military precision, a sign she was trying to keep order in her mind. On the nightstand, next to the hotel phone, was her sobriety coin and a well-worn copy of the big book. How are the meetings? Julian asked, gesturing to the book. Good, Maya said, pushing a noodle around her carton. There's a group meeting in the hotel conference room on Thursdays. Mostly travelers, pilots. It's interesting. She paused, then looked up at him, her vulnerability naked and bruising. It's lonely, Jules. I miss the city. I miss being around people who aren't passing through. Julian felt a sharp twist in his gut. Your sister can't stay here, Elena had said. I need to feel safe. Elena needed to feel safe from this terrified, gentle woman who was fighting a war against her own chemistry. Yet Elena had no qualms about inviting a predator into their home to sleep in their bed. It won't be much longer, Julian promised, his voice hard. 2 more days. Did you find an apartment? Maya asked hopefully. Better, Julian said. I'm handling the obstacle. Maya didn't ask what he meant. She was too tired to decipher riddles. She just nodded and took a sip of her water. I don't want to cause trouble between you and Elena. I know she's particular. She has her reputation. Her reputation, Julian repeated, the words tasting like ash. Yes, she cares very much about that. He thought about the seating chart back at the penthouse. He thought about Marcus, the man who had invaded his home, now being granted a seat of honor at the gala, while his own sister sat in a beige hotel room eating takeout by the highway. The injustice was so mathematically precise it felt designed. You're not the problem, Maya, Julian said fiercely, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. Her skin was cold. You were never the problem. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for you in the beginning. I thought I was keeping the peace. It's okay, she squeezed his hand. You're here now. Julian looked at the dark circles under her eyes, the brave set of her jaw. She was fighting to rebuild her life from the ground up. Elena, conversely, was dynamiting hers from the inside out. He checked his watch. He had to get back before Elena suspected anything, or worse, before she and Marcus had another strategy session in his study. I have to go, Julian said, standing up. But listen to me. Keep your phone on Saturday night. Late. Why? Just keep it on. I'm going to need you to come home. Home? Maya looked confused. To the penthouse? Yes, Julian said, putting on his coat. To the penthouse. It's going to be very quiet there soon. Plenty of room. He hugged her tight, feeling the fragility of her frame. When he walked out into the hallway, the anger that had been simmering in his chest for days finally boiled over. But it wasn't a chaotic, hot rage. It was cold. It was the absolute zero of space. He walked to the elevator, visualizing the gala. He pictured Elena in her gown, smiling for the cameras. He pictured Marcus in his rented tuxedo. They thought they were the main characters. They thought they were writing the story. They had no idea that Julian had already written the ending, and he was just waiting for the curtain to rise. He hit the button for the lobby. 2 days, he thought. 2 days until the walls come down. The penthouse had ceased to be a home. It was now a theater. By 4 p.m., the living room furniture had been moved into storage, replaced by rows of gold Chiavari chairs and high-top cocktail tables draped in heavy linen. The air was thick with the scent of $5,000 worth of white hydrangeas and the metallic tang of chafing dishes being lit. Elena was everywhere at once, a whirlwind of nervous energy and terrifying precision. She was barking orders at the catering manager about the hors d'oeuvres, something about the tartare not being cold enough, while simultaneously texting on 2 different phones. Julian stood by the audiovisual console in the corner of the room, near the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over a gray, frozen Chicago. He was the only still point in the spinning room. Julian, Elena called out, snapping her fingers, a habit she had picked up recently that made his jaw tighten. The projector. Is it linked? The charity reel needs to loop seamlessly before the speeches. It's linked, Julian said calmly. He ran his hand over the sleek black box of the control unit. He had personally overseen the setup. He had bypassed the event planner's laptop and hardwired his own MacBook Pro into the main feed. The video is queued. Resolution is perfect. Good. Check it again, she commanded, turning back to the florist to criticize the height of a centerpiece. If the audio glitches like it did at the summer gala, I will literally die. You won't have to worry about the audio, Julian murmured to himself. It will be crystal clear. He looked at the screen of his laptop. There were 2 files on the desktop. One was labeled Vance_Foundation_Charity_Ill_Final. MP4. The other was a folder simply labeled the_truth. He dragged the folder into the playlist queue, setting it to trigger immediately after his opening remarks. He closed the laptop lid as Elena approached him. She looked exhausted but manic, fueled by adrenaline and ambition. Is Marcus here yet? She whispered, leaning in close so the caterers wouldn't hear. He's arriving with the first wave of guests. I put him at table 9, as requested, Julian said. He reached out and straightened the lapel of her silk robe. You should go get dressed. People will be here in an hour. I need to check the lighting one more time, she fretted, looking at the chandeliers. Elena, Julian said, his voice firm. He took her shoulders. It's perfect. You've done enough. Go and make yourself beautiful. Tonight is about you. She softened, looking at him with a rare moment of genuine appreciation, or perhaps just relief that he was handling the tech. Thank you, Julian. I know I've been a nightmare this week. I just want this to be right. It will be exactly what you deserve, he said. She went to the master bedroom to change. Julian remained in the main room, watching the staff scurry. He felt like a ghost haunting his own life. These were his chairs, his view, his liquor being poured into the glasses, but he felt absolutely no attachment to any of it. It was all collateral damage now. He walked over to the security team stationed at the service elevator. He knew the head of security, a burly ex-cop named Davis. Davis, Julian said quietly, slipping a thick white envelope into the man's hand. Mr. Vance. Davis looked at the envelope, confused. There's a change in the protocol for tonight, Julian said, his voice low and authoritative. At approximately 8:15, during my speech, I'm going to enforce a standing trespass order. I need you and your team ready to escort 2 individuals out. Immediately. No negotiation. Davis frowned, checking the envelope. It contained a certified copy of the deed and the notarized prenup clause Julian had received from Robert. Davis scanned the legal language. He looked up, his eyes widening slightly as he understood. 2 individuals, sir? My wife, Julian said, his face expressionless. And the guest at table 9, Mr. Marcus Thorne. Davis stared at him for a long beat. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. Then, the security guard nodded, a professional mask descending. Understood, sir. We follow the deed holder's instructions. Good. Keep the freight elevator holding. I don't want a scene in the lobby. Copy that. Julian turned back to the room. The sun had set. The city lights were flickering on, creating a glittering backdrop for the carnage to come. Elena emerged from the hallway 20 minutes later. She was wearing a backless gold gown that shimmered like liquid money. She looked stunning. She looked like a trophy. Zip me? She asked, turning her back to him. Julian stepped forward. His hands were steady as he pulled the zipper up her spine. He felt the warmth of her skin, the skin he had touched for 7 years, the skin that had pressed against another man in this very room. He felt nothing but the cold slide of the metal zipper. You look expensive, he said. That's the point. She winked at him in the mirror. The doorbell rang. The first chimes of the evening. Showtime. Elena whispered, taking a deep breath and plastering her camera-ready smile onto her face. Yes, Julian agreed, stepping back into the shadows of the room. Showtime. By 8:15 p.m., the penthouse was vibrating with the collective hum of Chicago's upper crust. The air was heavy with expensive perfumes, the clink of Baccarat crystal, and the murmur of deals being struck in corners. It was a perfect ecosystem of wealth and pretense, exactly the kind of environment Elena thrived in. She was radiant, moving through the crowd in her gold gown like a queen bee tending to her hive. Julian watched her from the periphery. He saw her linger a moment too long at table 9, where Marcus sat. Marcus looked polished but slightly out of depth. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit well enough, but his posture was too relaxed, too sprawling for a formal event. He was drinking the vintage scotch like it was water, laughing loudly at a joke made by the city councilman. To anyone else, he was just a charming fitness entrepreneur. To Julian, he was a smudge on the lens. Elena caught Julian's eye across the room. She tapped her wrist discreetly, mouthing time. It was time for the speeches. The golden couple moment. Julian nodded. He walked to the small podium set up in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city skyline behind him was a wall of black and electric light. He tapped a spoon against his champagne flute. The sharp, high-pitched ring cut through the chatter. Slowly, the room quieted. Faces turned toward him. Donors, politicians, friends, and the wife who had betrayed him. Thank you all for coming, Julian began, his voice amplified by the hidden speakers. It was steady, calm, the voice of a man who knew exactly where the load-bearing columns were. Elena and I usually talk about charity on nights like this, he continued, resting his hands on the podium. We talk about giving back. But tonight, I want to talk about architecture. A few polite chuckles rippled through the room. Elena smiled, though her eyes flickered with a hint of confusion. This wasn't the rehearsed script. As many of you know, I designed this building. Julian gestured to the glass walls surrounding them. I designed it with a specific philosophy in mind, transparency. Modernism is obsessed with light. We build glass walls because we want to see the world. We want to feel connected to it. He paused, letting the silence settle. He looked directly at table 9. Marcus was leaning back, swirling his drink, looking bored. But there is a danger in transparency. Julian's voice dropped an octave, becoming colder. When you live in a glass house, you assume you are the one looking out. You forget that the glass works both ways. You forget that while you are watching the view, someone else might be watching you. The smile on Elena's face began to stiffen. Her hand went to her necklace, that nervous tick again. She took a half step toward the podium, as if to intervene, but stopped. We build structures to protect us, Julian went on, his gaze sweeping the room. We build marriages. We build reputations. We sign contracts. We think these things are solid concrete. But sometimes we find out the foundation is rotten. And when a foundation is rotten, you don't patch it. You don't paint over it. The room was dead silent now. The guests could feel the shift. The air had curdled. This wasn't a toast, it was an indictment. You condemn it, Julian said. You bring it down so you can clear the site. He looked at Elena. She was pale, her eyes wide with a dawning, terrifying realization. She looked from him to the projector screen behind him, which was currently displaying the Vance Foundation logo. Elena loves this apartment, Julian said, his voice returning to a conversational tone that was somehow even more terrifying. She calls it her sanctuary. She told me recently that she needs to feel safe here, that she has strict boundaries about who is allowed inside our home. Elena shook her head slightly, a microscopic movement. Don't, her eyes pleaded. Whatever you are doing, don't. But boundaries are interesting things, Julian said, reaching for his laptop which was connected to the podium. They only work if everyone respects them. Otherwise, they are just lines drawn in the dust. He typed a single command key. I'd like to share a different kind of presentation tonight, Julian announced to the silent room. Not about our charity work, but about the reality of life behind these glass walls. About what happens when you think no one is watching. Julian, stop, Elena whispered, audible only to those in the front row. She started walking toward him, her heels clicking fast on the floor. It's too late for that, Elena, Julian said into the microphone. The demolition has already begun. He hit the spacebar. The logo on the giant screen behind him vanished. The room plunged into a darker hue as the first video file began to play. It wasn't the polished charity reel. It was grainy, high-contrast black and white footage from a security camera. It was the kitchen. It was 11:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, and everyone in the room recognized the two figures on the screen. Julian stepped back from the podium, his face impassive. He wasn't the host anymore. He was the audience. The image on the screen was colossal. 10 feet high, high definition, and undeniable. It captured the exact moment Marcus lifted Elena onto the kitchen counter, the casual entitlement of his hands, the familiar way she arched her back. But it was the audio that sucked the air out of the room. He's boring, Marcus. He's safe. He doesn't see anything unless it's made of steel and concrete. The recorded voice echoed off the real glass walls, a ghostly overlay to the stunned silence of the gala. Turn it off, Elena screamed. It was a raw, guttural sound that tore through her poise. She lunged toward the laptop, her gold dress tangling around her legs. Julian didn't move to stop her. He simply closed the laptop lid himself. The screen went black. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise had been. It was the silence of 100 socialites realizing they were witnessing a public execution. Elena stood frozen halfway to the podium, her chest heaving. She looked at the guests, the investors, the politicians, the friends she had cultivated for years. They weren't looking at her with admiration anymore. They were looking at her with a mix of horror and morbid fascination. They were looking at the ruins. Julian leaned into the microphone. I apologize for the explicit nature of the content, he said, his voice flat, devoid of anger. But as I said, transparency is key. He looked toward table 9. Marcus was standing, his face pale, looking for an exit. But the tables were crowded, and there was nowhere to go. The spotlight from the ceiling, usually reserved for speeches, seemed to pin him in place. Mr. Thorne, Julian addressed him directly. I believe you're familiar with the location in that video. Marcus didn't speak. He looked like a trapped animal. Julian reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the folded legal document. He unfolded it with a sharp snap. This is the deed to the Vance Family Trust, which owns this penthouse, Julian explained to the room, though his eyes never left Elena. Clause 14b stipulates that the beneficiary's right of habitation is contingent upon the maintenance of the marital contract within the premises. Specifically, it voids residency rights immediately upon proof of infidelity committed on the property. He turned to Elena. She was trembling. You told me you needed boundaries, Elena. You told me my sister couldn't stay here because you needed to feel safe. You created rules. Julian, please, she whispered, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. Not here. Not like this. Let's go to the study. There is no study for you anymore, Julian said coldly. You have breached the lease. Legally, as of the moment that footage was verified, You are trespassing. He signaled to the back of the room. Davis? The heavy oak doors opened, and the security team entered. They weren't the usual event security. They were Julian's private contractors. They moved with efficiency. Please escort Mr. Thorne and Mrs. Vance out of the building, Julian ordered. They are not to re-enter. Their access codes have already been deactivated. Julian. Elena shrieked as Davis approached her. You can't do this. I live here. This is my home. Not anymore, Julian said. You made it a public space. You invited him in. Now, I'm inviting you both out. Davis gently but firmly took Elena's arm. She tried to pull away, her eyes wild. Get off me. Julian, stop this. I'm your wife. You're a liability, Julian corrected. At table 9, 2 other guards flanked Marcus. He didn't fight. He knew when he was beaten. He kept his head down, refusing to look at the guests as he was marched toward the service elevator. The same elevator he had likely used to sneak in and out for months. Elena, however, fought until the end. She looked at the crowd, pleading for help, for someone to intervene. Sarah, Michael, do something. But no one moved. In their world, infidelity was a sin, but getting caught so publicly was a crime. And financially, Julian Vance was the power in the room. No one was going to cross the architect for the woman who mocked him. Julian. Her voice cracked, desperate and shrill. Where am I supposed to go? Julian looked at her one last time. He remembered the night in the kitchen, her cold indifference to Maya's plight. There's a Hyatt near the airport, Julian said, his voice amplified for the last time. I hear the rooms are clean. The elevator doors opened. Davis guided a sobbing Elena inside. Marcus was shoved in beside her. The door slid shut, cutting off her wails. Julian stood alone at the podium. The room was deathly quiet. He picked up his champagne glass. Please, he said to the stunned guests, enjoy the view. It's much clearer now. He took a sip, set the glass down, and walked off the stage, leaving the debris of his marriage behind him. The exodus was swift. There is nothing that clears a room of polite society faster than the stench of raw, unvarnished truth. The guests murmured their goodbyes, eyes averting, clutching their swag bags a little too tightly as they hurried toward the elevators. There were no lingering conversations, no promises of lunch dates. The performance was over, and the audience was unsettled. By 10:30 p.m., the penthouse was empty, save for the catering staff. They moved like shadows, clearing the debris of the evening. Half-empty champagne flutes, untouched canapes, the crumpled linen napkins. They worked in a hush, sensing the volatility of the atmosphere. Julian stood by the window, his back to the room. He held a tumbler of water, staring out at the abyss of Lake Michigan. It was pitch black out there, the water merging with the sky, a vast, indifferent emptiness. Mr. Vance, the catering manager approached him tentatively. We're all finished. Do you need anything else? Julian turned. The apartment looked sterile again. The flowers were gone. The chairs were stacked. The projector screen was blank. No, Julian said, pulling a checkbook from his jacket pocket. He had already written the check, including a generous tip for their discretion. Thank you. Please lock the service entrance on your way out. Of course. Good night, sir. The door clicked shut. The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't the pressurized silence of a week ago, the kind that held secrets and lies. This was a clean, vacuum-sealed silence. It was the sound of a structure that had been stripped down to its steel beams. Julian walked through the living room. He passed the spot where the podium had stood. He walked into the kitchen. It smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and bleach. The ghosts of the video were gone. The counter was just marble again. Cold, hard, enduring. He walked down the hallway to the master bedroom. He didn't go in. He stopped at the door, looking at the bed. It looked like a stranger's bed. He knew he would never sleep in it again. He would have the decorators come tomorrow. He would burn the sheets. He would change the layout. He continued down the hall to the guest room. He pushed the door open. It was dark, save for the city light filtering through the blinds. The room was waiting. Julian took out his phone. He dialed the number he had called too infrequently over the years. It rang twice. Jules. Maya's voice was anxious. Is everything okay? It's late. I was worried. It's over, Julian said. His voice rasped slightly, the adrenaline finally leaving his system. The party is over. Did it go well? She asked, hesitant. It went exactly as designed, Julian said. He leaned against the doorframe, looking at the empty bed in the guest room. Elena is gone. She won't be coming back. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Maya didn't ask for details. She didn't ask where Elena went. She understood the finality in his tone. Are you okay? She asked softly. I'm alone, Julian answered honestly. But I'm okay. He looked around the penthouse. It was too big for one person. It was a glass cage in the sky, beautiful and cold. But it was his cage. And for the first time in years, the air inside was breathable. Pack your things, Maya, Julian said. I'm coming to get you. Tonight. Right now? Check out. I'll be there in 40 minutes. But what about the rules? Her boundaries? The boundaries have been redrawn, Julian said. This is our home now. There's plenty of room. He hung up the phone. He walked back to the living room and picked up his coat. Before he left, he turned off the main lights. The apartment plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the glow of the city below. The glass walls reflected the skyline, thousands of other windows, thousands of other lives. Somewhere out there, Elena was checking into a hotel, realizing that her reflection no longer mattered to anyone. Julian buttoned his coat. He didn't look back. He walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the garage, and began the descent. The building stood firm. The foundation held. The cracks were gone. He was going to pick up his sister. He was going to start the renovation.